I knew I was in trouble the moment I saw Patricia Mooreland standing at my front door with her arms crossed, and her lips pressed into a thin line that could cut glass. My name is Quincy Emerson, and I had just finished my morning coffee when the doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession, the kind of aggressive ringing that tells you someone thinks their time is more valuable than yours. I opened the door to find Patricia, our HOA president, dressed in her usual power suit despite it being a Saturday morning in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair was styled in that aggressive bob that seemed to be a requirement for women who enjoyed making other people's lives miserable. "Quincy," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk about that eyesore you call a storage building." I blinked at her, still processing the caffeine. "Good morning to you too, Patricia. What about my storage building?" She thrust a manila folder into my chest. "This is an official notice from the Sunset Ridge HOA. That structure is in violation of Section 7, subsection 4 of our community guidelines. It exceeds the maximum allowable square footage for auxiliary structures and wasn't approved by the Architectural Review Committee. You have 30 days to remove it." I opened the folder and skimmed the document inside. Sure enough, there it was in black and white, complete with photos of my property taken from the street. The storage building in question was attached to the back of my house, a wooden structure that the previous owner had built about 15 years ago. When I bought the house 2 years earlier, the building had been part of the home inspection and everything had checked out fine. "Patricia, this building was here when I bought the place. I didn't build it." "That's irrelevant," she said, her voice sharp. "The previous owner never got proper approval either. We're cracking down on all violations in the neighborhood. The building needs to go." "It's not just a storage building," I explained, trying to keep my voice level. "I keep all my tools in there, my lawn equipment, boxes of stuff from the move. Where am I supposed to put everything?" "Not my problem," Patricia said. 30 days, Quincy. If it's not gone, we'll fine you $500 per day until you comply. And if you still refuse, we'll place a lien on your property." She turned on her heel and walked back to her white BMW parked in my driveway, leaving me standing there with my mouth hanging open. I watched her drive away, the manila folder feeling heavier in my hands with each passing second. I spent the rest of the morning fuming and reading through the notice in detail. The HOA claimed my storage building was 200 square feet over the maximum allowed size, and that the color didn't match the approved palette for the neighborhood. The whole thing felt petty and vindictive, which wasn't surprising given my history with Patricia. 3 months earlier, I had filed a complaint about her constantly parking her car across 2 spaces in the community pool parking lot. She had been forced to stop, but I could tell she hadn't forgotten. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the office of Tom Rodriguez, a local attorney who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. His office was in a strip mall in Scottsdale, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Tom was in his 50s, with graying hair and a patient demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He listened to my story while reviewing the HOA notice and the documents I had brought from when I purchased the house. "Here's the situation," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. HOAs in Arizona have pretty broad authority to enforce their rules. However, they also have to follow proper procedures. The fact that this building was here for 15 years without any complaints is interesting, but it doesn't automatically exempt you from the rules. So what are my options? I asked. "Well, first thing we should do is request a hearing with the HOA board. You have that right under Arizona law. We can argue that the building was grandfathered in, that removing it would cause undue hardship. things like that. But Quincy, I have to be honest with you, if the rules are clear and they're following proper procedure, your chances of winning aren't great. I left Tom's office feeling deflated. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks away, which gave me some time to prepare, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle. That evening, I was in the storage building, taking inventory of everything I would need to move if I lost the hearing. I had been putting this off, not wanting to face the reality of the situation. The building was packed with stuff: my table saw, miter saw, drill press, and dozens of other tools hung on the walls. Boxes of holiday decorations were stacked in one corner, camping gear in another. My late father's record collection, which I couldn't bring myself to get rid of, took up an entire shelf. As I moved a stack of boxes, something caught my eye. The interior wall that connected the storage building to the house had a strange configuration. There was a large wooden beam running vertically from floor to ceiling, and it looked different from the rest of the framing. It was thicker, older, and seemed to carry through the wall into the main house structure. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, examining the beam more closely. The more I looked, the more curious I became. This wasn't just a simple partition wall. It looked like actual structural framing. I went inside the house and into the laundry room, which shared a wall with the storage building. I had never paid much attention to this room before, but now I noticed something odd. There was a slight sag in the ceiling, barely noticeable, but definitely there. I pressed my hand against the wall, and I could feel how solid it was, as if there was serious support behind it. A terrible thought occurred to me. What if the storage building wasn't just decorative? What if it was actually supporting part of the house? The next morning, I called every structural engineer in the Phoenix area that I could find online. Most of them were booked weeks out, but I finally found one who had a cancellation and could come out that Friday. His name was Dr. Marcus Chen, and he ran a small engineering consulting firm in Tempe. Dr. Chen arrived right on time, carrying a large briefcase and wearing a polo shirt with his company logo. He was probably in his late 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of professional competence. "So you think this storage building might be load-bearing?" he asked, looking at the structure from the outside. "I don't know what I think," I admitted. "I just noticed some things that seemed strange, and given that I might be forced to tear it down, I wanted to make sure doing so wouldn't damage the house." "Smart thinking," Dr. Chen said. "Let's take a look." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Chen examined every inch of the storage building and the adjoining house structure. He took measurements, photos, and used various instruments I didn't recognize. He crawled into my attic and spent 30 minutes up there, then went down into the crawl space under the house. I followed him around, trying not to get in the way, my anxiety building with each passing minute. Finally, he emerged from the crawl space, dusting off his pants and looking serious. "Mr. Emerson, we need to talk," he said. "Can we sit down somewhere?" We went into my kitchen, and Dr. Chen pulled out a tablet, showing me photos and diagrams he had made. "This is a very unusual situation," he began. "Your house was built in 1987, correct? That's what the records say. And the storage building was added around 2010. According to the previous owner, yes." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "Here's what happened. Your house has a structural problem that probably started developing in the early 2000s. See this foundation here?" He pointed to a photo. "This section has experienced significant settling, probably due to soil erosion or perhaps a minor leak in the plumbing that went undetected. This settling caused the southwest corner of your house to drop about 2 inches. My stomach sank. That sounds expensive. It would have been, Dr. Chen said. But here's where it gets interesting. When the previous owner built this storage building, either by accident or by design, they essentially propped up that failing corner of the house. Look at these support posts here. He showed me more photos. These aren't just sitting on a concrete pad. They're driven deep into the ground, past the problematic soil layer, and they're directly supporting the main house structure through this connecting beam. The storage building isn't just attached to your house, it's quite literally holding up the southwest corner. I stared at the photos, trying to process what he was telling me. So, if I remove the storage building, the southwest corner of your house will resume settling, probably quite rapidly. You're looking at major structural damage, cracked walls, broken foundation, damaged plumbing and electrical. The house would become unsafe to live in. You would need to do the foundation repair work that should have been done years ago, except now it would be even more extensive and expensive. How expensive are we talking? Dr. Chen grimaced. Conservative estimate, $60,000 to $80,000, possibly more depending on what we find once work begins, and you would need to move out during the repairs, which could take several weeks. I put my head in my hands. This was a nightmare. So the storage building can't be removed. Not without proper foundation repairs first. I can write you a detailed report explaining all of this, with structural drawings and engineering calculations. Any competent contractor or engineer will tell you the same thing. Removing that building right now would be a catastrophic mistake. Dr. Chen sent me his report 2 days later. It was 40 pages long, full of technical language and diagrams, but the conclusion was crystal clear. The storage building was providing critical structural support to the house and could not be safely removed without extensive foundation repairs. I immediately forwarded the report to Tom Rodriguez and requested an emergency meeting. We met that afternoon at his office. Tom read through the report carefully, occasionally nodding or making notes. When he finished, he looked up at me with something close to a smile. "This changes everything," he said. "The HOA can't force you to remove a structure that's necessary for the safety and stability of your home. That would be beyond their authority, even in Arizona where HOAs have a lot of power. So I can keep the building. We'll need to present this at the hearing, but yes, I think we have a strong case now. The HOA's rules don't override basic safety requirements. Forcing you to remove this building would be forcing you to damage your own property." The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. I had been to HOA meetings before, but never one where I was the main item on the agenda. Tom and I arrived early, and he helped me set up a laptop and projector so we could present Dr. Chen's findings. The community center was a bland, fluorescent-lit room with beige walls and folding chairs arranged in rows. A table at the front served as the board's headquarters. Patricia arrived 15 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start, along with the other board members. Harold Finch, a retired accountant who served as treasurer, Deanne Kowalski, the secretary, and Robert Yamamoto, a member-at-large. Patricia barely acknowledged me as she took her seat at the center of the table. She shuffled through some papers and spoke quietly with the other board members. Several of my neighbors filed in and took seats, curious to see how this would play out. I recognized most of them. Jennifer Thompson from across the street, Bill and Linda Morrison from 2 doors down, and at least a dozen others. At 7 o'clock sharp, Patricia called the meeting to order by tapping a gavel on the table. "Tonight we're here to address the violation notice issued to Quincy Emerson regarding the unauthorized storage structure on his property," Patricia announced. "Mr. Emerson has requested a hearing to contest the removal order. Mr. Emerson, you have 15 minutes to present your case." I stood up, my hands shaking slightly. Tom gave me an encouraging nod. "Thank you for hearing me out," I began. "I understand there are concerns about my storage building. When I received the notice to remove it, I was obviously upset, but I was prepared to comply. However, as I started planning for the removal, I discovered something that changes everything." I walked over to the laptop and brought up the first slide of our presentation, a photo of the storage building. This building was constructed 15 years ago by the previous owner. I've had a licensed structural engineer examine both the building and my house, and he's made a discovery that's, frankly, pretty shocking. Over the next 10 minutes, I walked them through Dr. Chen's findings, showing photos of the foundation settling, the support structure, and the connecting beam. I explained how the storage building was literally holding up part of my house. Tom had helped me simplify the technical language so that anyone could understand it. "The bottom line is this," I concluded. "If I remove this building without first spending $60,000 to $80,000 on foundation repairs, my house will suffer major structural damage. It could become uninhabitable. I'm not trying to defy the HOA rules for the sake of it. I simply cannot safely remove this building." Patricia's face had grown increasingly red during my presentation. When I finished, she stood up abruptly. "This is absurd," she said. "You're telling me that a backyard shed is the only thing keeping your house from falling down?" "I find that very hard to believe." Tom stood up. "Mrs. Mooreland, if I may, I'm Tom Rodriguez, Mr. Emerson's attorney. The structural engineer who prepared this report is Dr. Marcus Chen, a licensed professional engineer with 20 years of experience. His findings are based on careful examination and measurement. I have copies of his full report, including his calculations and credentials, for each board member." Tom distributed the reports. Harold, the treasurer, immediately started flipping through his copy, his expression growing more serious as he read. "This is just a stalling tactic," Patricia insisted. "How convenient that right when we order him to remove this eyesore, he suddenly discovers it's supposedly essential." "I would hardly call major foundation problems convenient," I shot back. "Do you think I want to deal with this? I'm just trying to protect my home." Diane, the secretary, raised her hand timidly. "Patricia, I think we should take this seriously. This report looks very detailed." "I agree," Harold said, still reading. "These calculations are way over my head, but this engineer seems to know what he's talking about. We might need to get a second opinion." "Absolutely not," Patricia snapped. "Mr. Emerson is in violation of the rules. The rules are very clear. We're not in the business of making exceptions just because it's inconvenient to follow them." Robert, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Patricia, with all due respect, I don't think we can force someone to damage their own home. That seems like it could expose us to liability." "Exactly," Tom interjected. "If the HOA forces Mr. Emerson to remove this structure, and his house suffers the damage described in this engineering report, the HOA would be liable for those damages. We're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs and living expenses." Patricia's face was now bright red. "This meeting is getting off track. The rules are the rules. Mr. Emerson's building is in violation and it needs to be removed. That's my decision as president." "It's not just your decision," Harold said firmly. "The board votes on enforcement actions." "I move that we table this matter pending an independent structural review." "I second that motion," Deanne said quickly. Patricia looked like she might explode. "This is ridiculous. We're setting a terrible precedent. If we let him keep his oversized shed, everyone will want special treatment." "It's not special treatment, it's basic common sense," Robert said. All in favor of tabling the enforcement action pending further review. Harold, Deanne, and Robert all raised their hands. Patricia sat fuming, her hand firmly on the table. "Motion carries," Harold announced. "Mr. Emerson, you're off the hook for now, pending our independent review." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but Tom put a hand on my shoulder, cautioning me not to celebrate too obviously. We gathered our materials and left the meeting while Patricia glared daggers at us. Over the next few weeks, the HOA hired their own structural engineer to review Dr. Chen's findings. I gave him full access to my property, and he spent an entire day examining everything. When his report came back, it confirmed everything Dr. Chen had said. The storage building was indeed providing critical support, and removing it would cause significant damage. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the second engineering report came back, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was even more aggressive than the first. It claimed that I was responsible for correcting the foundation problem, and that once those repairs were complete, I would still need to remove the storage building. They gave me 90 days to complete the foundation repairs and remove the structure or face daily fines. I immediately called Tom Rodriguez. "Can they do this?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Tom was quiet for a moment. "It's a gray area. They're arguing that the underlying problem is your foundation, not the building itself. They're saying you need to fix your foundation and then remove the non-compliant structure. But I don't have $60,000 sitting around to fix a foundation problem I didn't cause. I know. Let me review the new notice carefully, and I'll call you back." That evening, Tom called with bad news. "They're technically within their rights to require you to maintain your property in good condition. The foundation settling could be considered a maintenance issue. However, requiring you to spend that kind of money on repairs just so you can then remove a building that's currently functioning as a solution seems excessive and potentially unreasonable." "So what do I do?" We fight back harder. "I think it's time to go on the offensive. I'm going to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and unreasonable enforcement. We'll ask the court to permanently exempt your building from the size restrictions given its structural necessity." The lawsuit was filed the following week. I had to take out a loan to pay Tom's retainer, but I didn't see any other choice. Patricia and the HOA board were served with papers, and suddenly things got very serious. What I didn't know at the time was that Patricia was about to make things much worse for herself. A week after we filed the lawsuit, I came home from work to find my storage building spray painted with red X's. 2 large X's marked the sides facing the street, like something you would see on a condemned building. My hands were shaking as I took photos and immediately called the police. Officer Sarah Martinez arrived within 20 minutes. She was professional and thorough, taking photos and writing up a report for vandalism. I explained the situation with the HOA, and she made notes about that as well. "You have any security cameras?" she asked. "No, but my neighbor across the street does. Jennifer has a Ring doorbell that faces this direction." Officer Martinez and I walked across the street and knocked on Jennifer Thompson's door. Jennifer was in her 30s, a single mom who worked as a nurse at the hospital. She answered, still wearing her scrubs. When we explained what had happened, her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, yes, let me check my camera footage." We crowded around her phone as she pulled up the Ring app. She scrolled back through the footage to earlier that afternoon, around 2 in the morning. The video quality wasn't great in the darkness, but it clearly showed a person approaching my property, spray painting the building and then walking away. "Can you zoom in on that?" Officer Martinez asked. Jennifer did, and my stomach dropped. Even in the grainy footage, there was no mistaking that aggressive blonde bob. It was Patricia Mooreland. "Well," Officer Martinez said slowly, "that's interesting. Can you send me that footage, please?" Jennifer immediately forwarded the video to the officer's email. Officer Martinez thanked her and turned to me. "Mr. Emerson, I'm going to pay a visit to Mrs. Mooreland. Would you like to press charges?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. I went with Officer Martinez to Patricia's house, which was one of the largest in the neighborhood, a sprawling two-story with a perfectly manicured lawn. Patricia answered the door in a bathrobe, her face free of makeup and her famous bob wrapped in a towel. Her expression went from annoyed to shocked when she saw the police officer. "Patricia Mooreland?" Officer Martinez asked. "Yes, what's this about? We have you on camera vandalizing Mr. Emerson's property earlier today. I need to ask you some questions." Patricia's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "I don't know what you're talking about. Madam, we have clear video footage of you spray painting Mr. Emerson's storage building at approximately 2:15 this morning. Mr. Emerson is pressing charges. You're going to need to come down to the station. This is outrageous. I'm the HOA president. That building is a violation." "That doesn't give you the right to vandalize it," Officer Martinez said calmly. "Please put some clothes on. You're under arrest for criminal damage to property." Watching Patricia being led to a police car in handcuffs was one of the most surreal moments of my life. Several neighbors came out to watch, including Harold from the HOA board, who looked absolutely mortified. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that the HOA president had been arrested for vandalizing my property. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors I barely knew called to offer support and to apologize for Patricia's behavior. Harold Finch came to my door that evening, looking exhausted and apologetic. "Quincy, I want to apologize on behalf of the board," he said. "What Patricia did was completely unacceptable and illegal. We had an emergency board meeting this afternoon, and we voted to remove her as president. I'm taking over temporarily until we can hold proper elections." "I appreciate that, Harold. We're also dropping the enforcement action against your storage building. Given its structural necessity, it makes no sense to force you to remove it. We'll update our records to reflect that your building is grandfathered in due to its structural function." I felt tears of relief welling up in my eyes. "Thank you. You have no idea how much stress this has caused." "I can imagine. And I want you to know, I'm personally going to make sure the HOA reimburses you for the cost of repainting your building. It's the least we can do." Patricia was charged with criminal damage to property, a misdemeanor in Arizona for damage under $1,000. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 50 hours of community service, a fine and probation. More significantly, she was forced to resign from the HOA board entirely. But the story didn't end there. As Tom Rodriguez continued to investigate for our lawsuit, he uncovered something even more disturbing. It was about 2 months after Patricia's arrest, and Tom called me to his office for an urgent meeting. When I arrived, he had several manila folders spread across his desk, all marked with the HOA's name. "Quincy, I've been reviewing the HOA's financial records as part of our lawsuit, and I found something very troubling," Tom said. "Patricia has been embezzling money from the HOA." My jaw dropped. "What?" "Over the past 3 years, she's siphoned off approximately $47,000 from the HOA's maintenance and reserve funds. She did it through fake vendor invoices for work that was never done. She would write checks to these vendors, but the companies don't exist. The checks were deposited into accounts she controlled. How did no one notice? She was very clever about it. She kept the individual amounts small enough not to raise red flags, and as president, she had a lot of control over the finances. Harold, as treasurer, only reviewed summary reports, not individual transactions. But when I started looking closely, the pattern became obvious. What do we do? I've already contacted the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. They're opening a criminal investigation. This is felony theft and fraud. We're talking serious prison time if she's convicted. The investigation moved quickly. The county attorney subpoenaed the HOA's bank records and found exactly what Tom had described. Patricia had been stealing from the HOA for years, using the money to finance her lifestyle. The renovation she had done on her house the previous year, paid for with stolen HOA funds. Her luxury car, same thing. Patricia was arrested again, this time for felony theft and fraud. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 3 years in prison. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy on her. Financial crimes against community organizations were taken seriously, especially when the defendant was in a position of trust. The trial took place 6 months after the initial charges were filed. I attended every day, sitting in the courtroom gallery and watching as the prosecution systematically destroyed Patricia's defense. They presented bank records, fake invoices, and testimony from accounting experts. Harold testified about how Patricia had manipulated the financial reports to hide her theft. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia took the stand in her own defense, which her lawyer later admitted was a mistake. She claimed she had only borrowed the money and intended to pay it back, but she couldn't explain why she had created fake companies and hidden the transactions. She also couldn't explain where all the money had gone, since her bank accounts showed she had spent almost all of it. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: 5 counts of theft, 7 counts of fraud, and 3 counts of forgery related to the fake invoices. At sentencing, the judge was not sympathetic. Patricia cried and apologized, claiming she had been under stress and made terrible mistakes. The judge noted that these weren't mistakes, but calculated crimes committed over multiple years. He sentenced her to 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. He also ordered her to repay the full amount she stole, plus interest. As for my lawsuit against the HOA, Tom and I reached a settlement. The HOA agreed to permanently exempt my storage building from the size restrictions, formalize that the building was grandfathered in, and pay my legal fees. In exchange, I agreed to drop any claims for emotional distress or punitive damages. It seemed like a fair resolution, and I was honestly just ready to move on with my life. Harold did a good job as interim president, and the HOA held elections 3 months after Patricia's conviction. Harold won the presidency in a landslide, running on a platform of transparency and common sense enforcement. One of his first acts was to establish new financial controls, including requiring 2 board members to approve any expenditure over $500 and hiring an independent accountant to review the books quarterly. The storage building stayed exactly where it was, still holding up the southwest corner of my house. I had it repainted in a color that better matched the house, not because the HOA required it, but because after everything that had happened, I wanted to show good faith to my neighbors. Eventually, I did save up enough money to have the foundation repairs done properly. It took 2 years and cost even more than Dr. Chen had estimated, nearly $90,000. The contractors had to excavate the entire southwest corner of the house, install new support pilings, and rebuild that section of the foundation. During the work, they kept the storage building in place, using it as temporary support while they worked on the foundation beneath it. When the repairs were finally complete, the structural engineer who signed off on the work confirmed that the storage building was no longer load-bearing. The proper foundation repairs had eliminated the settling problem, and the house was now structurally sound without the building's support. Harold came by while the construction was wrapping up. "So, Quincy," he said with a slight smile, "now that your foundation is fixed, are you going to remove the storage building?" I looked at the building, at the fresh paint and the tools hanging inside, at the space where I kept my father's record collection and all the accumulated stuff of daily life. "Not a chance," I said. "This building earned its place. Besides, I need somewhere to store all my stuff." Harold laughed. "Good. To be honest, I think it looks fine, and after everything you went through to keep it, you've more than earned the right." Jennifer Thompson from across the street became a good friend after everything that happened. She told me later that she had never liked Patricia, that the woman had given her a hard time about her children's toys being visible in the front yard. Several other neighbors shared similar stories of Patricia's petty tyranny. In a weird way, my fight over the storage building had helped expose a much larger problem in the community. The neighborhood was better off without Patricia Mooreland running things with an iron fist. Harold implemented a new approach where the HOA focused on genuine community improvement rather than nitpicky enforcement. Newsletters went out monthly explaining the HOA's activities and expenses. Board meetings became actually productive rather than just Patricia's personal fiefdom. I kept in touch with Dr. Marcus Chen, the structural engineer who had saved me. When I finally did the foundation repairs, I hired his firm to oversee the work and make sure it was done right. He told me that my case had become something of a legend in local engineering circles, a perfect example of how a temporary fix could become a permanent structural necessity. Tom Rodriguez and I became friends too. He sent me a Christmas card every year with a photo of his family, and he always included a handwritten note thanking me for the most interesting case of his career. He said most HOA disputes were pretty cut and dry, but mine had given him the chance to really dig into structural engineering and community governance law. As for Patricia, she served her full 2-year sentence at the Perryville State Prison Complex, west of Phoenix. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she was working in the prison library and taking business ethics classes, which struck me as darkly ironic. Her house went into foreclosure while she was incarcerated, since she couldn't keep up the mortgage payments, and a young family bought it at auction. They were nice people who kept to themselves and never gave anyone trouble. When Patricia was released on probation, she moved away from Arizona entirely. Someone said she went to live with a sister in Oregon, but I never confirmed that and honestly didn't care. She was gone from our lives, and that was enough. My storage building still stands today, solid and functional, painted a tasteful sage green that actually does complement the house nicely. I added better shelving inside, installed LED lighting, and even ran electricity out there so I could use my power tools more easily. Every time I walk past it, I remember everything that happened, all the stress and anger and fear, but also the relief of winning, of standing up to someone who abused their authority. The concrete slab where the building sits has a small brass plaque that I installed myself, commissioned from a local engraving shop. It reads, "Built 2010, saved 2024, forever grateful." Visitors sometimes ask about it, and I'm always happy to tell them the story. The lawsuit, the arrest, the trial, the foundation repairs, All of it taught me something important about homeownership and community living. HOAs can serve a valuable purpose in maintaining neighborhood standards and property values, but they can also become vehicles for petty tyrants to exercise power over their neighbors. The key is vigilance, participation, and the courage to stand up when something is wrong. I started attending HOA meetings regularly after everything settled down, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I figured if I had gone through all that trouble to keep my house, I should take an active role in the community that surrounded it. Harold appreciated having another voice at the meetings, and I eventually joined the Architectural Review Committee, the same committee that had initially targeted my building. We revised the rules to be more reasonable, and to include provisions for grandfathered structures and exceptions based on structural necessity. We also added a requirement that any enforcement action over $5,000 in potential cost to the homeowner had to be reviewed by at least 2 independent experts before proceeding. It wouldn't prevent all problems, but it would make another Patricia situation much less likely. My neighbors treated me differently after everything that happened. I went from being the quiet guy who kept to himself to being something of a neighborhood legend, the man who beat the HOA and exposed its corrupt president. People waved to me more often, stopped to chat when they saw me outside, invited me to barbecues and block parties. I even started dating Susan Jameson, a divorced teacher who lived 4 streets over and had heard about my case from mutual friends. We had been seeing each other for about a year now, and things were going well. Susan thought the whole storage building saga was hilarious, in retrospect. "You're the only man I know who went to war over a shed," she teased me once while we were having dinner. "It wasn't just a shed," I protested, but I was smiling. "It was a principle. It was a load-bearing principle," she shot back, and we both laughed. The thing about going through something like this is that it changes you. Before all this happened, I was the kind of person who avoided conflict, who would rather back down than fight. I bought the house as a quiet place to live my quiet life, and I didn't want trouble with anyone, certainly not the HOA. But sometimes trouble finds you anyway, and when it does, you have to decide who you are and what you stand for. I could have given in to Patricia's initial demand, spent thousands of dollars moving everything out of the storage building, hired contractors to demolish it, and dealt with whatever consequences came from removing structural support from my house. It would have been easier in some ways, less stressful certainly, but it also would have been wrong. The building wasn't hurting anyone. It was on my property, serving a vital function, and Patricia's vendetta against it was personal and petty. If I had given in, I would have felt like a coward, and Patricia would have moved on to bully someone else with even more confidence. Standing up to her, even though it cost me money and time and caused tremendous stress, was the right thing to do. And when we discovered her embezzlement, I realized that my fight had accomplished something even larger than saving my building. It had helped protect my neighbors from a thief who was stealing from all of us. The Sunset Ridge community was stronger now, more transparent and better governed. Harold ran the HOA the way it should be run, as a service organization that genuinely tried to maintain and improve the neighborhood rather than as a power trip for whoever happened to be in charge. We had regular audits, open books, and a board that actually listened to homeowners' concerns. On warm Phoenix evenings, I sometimes sat in my backyard with a beer, looking at the storage building and thinking about everything that had happened. The structure stood there solid and unmoving, a testament to the previous owner's ingenuity and to my own refusal to back down. The tools inside represented my hobbies and my work. The The boxes held memories and possessions accumulated over a lifetime, and the whole thing together represented something even more important: the right to use your own property in a reasonable way without being bullied by people who think rules matter more than common sense. Dr. Chen's engineering report sat in a frame on my office wall, all 40 pages of it. Visitors sometimes thought it was strange to frame such a technical document, but to me, it was proof that sometimes the truth really does set you free. Those calculations and diagrams had saved my house and my financial future. They deserved to be honored. The criminal case against Patricia became something of a local news story for a while. A reporter from the Arizona Republic wrote a feature about HOA corruption and used Patricia's case as the centerpiece. The article quoted me extensively, and for a few weeks, I couldn't go anywhere without people recognizing me. It was uncomfortable at first, but most people were supportive, sharing their own HOA horror stories and thanking me for standing up to abuse of authority. The publicity led to some changes at the state level too. An Arizona state representative introduced legislation requiring more oversight of HOA finances and making it easier for homeowners to challenge unreasonable enforcement actions. The bill cited Patricia's case specifically in its findings section. I was invited to testify before a state legislative committee, which was surreal and intimidating, but I did my best to explain what had happened and why better protections were needed. The legislation ultimately passed with bipartisan support. It wasn't perfect, but it required annual independent audits for HOAs over a certain size, mandated financial transparency, and created a state ombudsman's office to help mediate HOA disputes. Small changes, maybe, but changes that would help protect other homeowners from going through what I had experienced. Life in Sunset Ridge settled into a comfortable rhythm. The controversy faded, Patricia's name stopped coming up in conversation, and people moved on to worry about other things like pool maintenance schedules and upcoming holiday decorations contests. My storage building blended into the landscape, just another feature of the neighborhood, unremarkable except to those who knew its history. But I never forgot, and I never took it for granted. Every time I unlocked that door and stepped inside to grab a tool or put away some equipment, I remembered what it had cost to keep it. I remembered Patricia's red face at that first hearing, the red X's spray painted on the walls, the structural engineering reports, the lawyers and courts and all of it. And I remembered that sometimes standing up for yourself matters more than taking the easy path. Sometimes a storage building is more than just a storage building. Sometimes it is a load-bearing structure in more ways than one, holding up not just your house but your principles and your right to live peacefully in your own home. The small brass plaque on the foundation still catches the light on sunny Arizona mornings, a reminder of battles fought and won, of justice eventually served, and of the simple truth that your home is worth fighting for.